Hello and welcome to your next episode. In this episode, I want to share a little more about my life experiences and how I ended up in two relationships where domestic abuse, violence was prevalent. Now, most people who know me feel and often express their shock that I was actually or have been a victim, for want of a better word, of domestic violence. And for some reason, people think that that's strange. They see me as being quite confident, self-assured, someone who knows their own mind. And people, rightly or wrongly, then struggle to understand how I got into that situation. So I wanted to spend some time talking about that because some things have been stirring up for me lately as I've been watching a soap opera here in the UK, and there's a storyline in this soap opera about coercive control. So I can, from watching that, I can clearly relate. I can see how that coerciveness, manipulation is a slow burn to start with, that you don't really realize what's happening and you go along and you make excuses and things just don't seem right, but you still carry on. So in this TV show, I can clearly see what they've done. And I've spoken about the TV show and I've said to people, it's so good how they've portrayed it, that only if you've been in a relationship like that would you see the similarities, where you will see how subtle abusive partners are and can be in those relationships in those early days. So let's take a step back. So when I was 21, I got involved with a guy quite quickly. I was very flattered by his attention. I didn't quite understand why he was making a beeline for me. I was pretty average, I thought. Yet he kind of honed in on me. Make of that what you will. So he was 8 years older than me. He was new to the town where I lived. He had his fingers in a lot of pies. He was a man about town. Everyone wanted to know, where's this guy from? What's he about? So he had lots of kind of buzz around him. And I was like, why is he interested in me? But I went along with it. So I can't even think, it's perhaps December time, early December time, maybe. He was kind of making his feelings known to me, kind of hit ahead, maybe. I think it was Boxing Day. He ended up, I think, actually spending Christmas with me and my family because he didn't have family nearby, possibly. So then he kind of like made his like of me known. And I was a bit like, oh, you know, I was a bit kind of like taken aback by it. Anyhow, so yeah, I had a little like get together or whatever, not really, nothing serious, just a kind of little mess about. And then within a few days, he turned up at my place of work with a bunch of flowers. And I remember coming in to where I worked, and he was sat at a table with this bunch. No, I think the flowers were on the table. He wasn't there. And the flowers were on the table. So I didn't really know who the flowers were for. I don't even think I knew that he was there, to be fair. I worked in a pub, so there's many different people that come in and going. So these flowers were on the table, and he made a big fuss about presenting me with these flowers in front of people. And I was just like, it wasn't my birthday. It was no special occasion. I didn't understand why he bought me these flowers. And I think I had like a bit of a nervous laugh, a bit of like, I was embarrassed. I didn't really know how to respond to them because, like I said, it was very, very early days. there's no reason why anyone should be buying anyone flowers that early stage. And it wasn't even a relationship. It was a bit of fun. And he presented me with these flowers, and I was a bit, like I say, I was a bit awkward about receiving them. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, thanks. And just kind of wanted to like the ground to swallow me. And then he went really weird and acted really kind of like throwing it back at me, saying, oh, how can you be so ungrateful? I bought you these flowers. I think so much of you. I wanted to show you how much I thought about you. So I bought these flowers, and yet you're ungrateful. And I was just like, whoa, okay. You know, I wasn't really expecting flowers. So he went a bit like dirty guts about that. But I let it slide and everything else. And then it came to New Year's Eve. And around that sort of time, in the run up to New Year's Eve, I'd actually just been told that I was going to be evicted from the house where I live with my daughter. So my daughter was 1.5, almost 2. And I'd received information that, well, received notification, you could say that I was being evicted and I had to leave suddenly and find somewhere else to live. So this was like I had to be out at, like, I think it was like the 2nd of January or something like that, really quickly. And I had approached the local housing authority, who said, you don't reach the criteria for emergency accommodation. If you need to move and you're being homeless and you have to go, you will either have to find somewhere else to live, or we can put you in temporary accommodation, but you will have to pay for it because you work. And at the time, I worked part-time in a pub, so I wasn't on a huge amount of money. So I literally had nowhere to go. There was nowhere for me to move into. So through conversations with this guy that I'd only just been seeing for a few weeks, he was living in a house, and his landlord said it was okay for me to move in. Now, under usual circumstances, there's no way that I would move in, or anyone would move in with somebody after just a couple of weeks of knowing someone. But it was a desperate situation that I found myself in. So I moved out of the house where I lived, put my things into storage, and moved in reluctantly, but kind of thankfully that I had somewhere to live with this guy. So this is at the very beginning of January. So over the next 4 weeks, the relationship kind of like sped up from there. So bearing in mind, we had the incident with the flowers, which kind of like, okay, that might have just been a one-off. Let's just move in. I need somewhere to live. It will do for now, was my kind of thoughts behind that. So this is like a 21-year-old child who's almost 2. Let's move in. At least we've got a house in my local town so I can go to work and then put something in place later. That was my initial thought. So in this relationship, so I moved into this house with this guy, and that's where things seriously started to go awry. So bearing in mind I had a child, the guy turns out to be very jealous of my relationship with my child, so much so that it was kind of like, oh, you're giving more attention to her, what about me? And my daughter used to go to her father's every weekend, so we would have the weekends together, so it wasn't like we had a child 24/7 anyway. So it was like almost like a bit of difficulty he had with that kind of dynamic. And then sometimes I'd find myself to put my daughter to bed, I'd fall asleep, and then I'd get the cold shoulder treatment when I'd woke up at a certain time. And then, so yeah, so it would kind of like, he'd blow hot and cold in the house and in that relationship. However, in front of other people, they thought he was the life and soul of the party, that he was, you know, man about town. He had all these qualities. People kind of idolized him in a weird kind of way. Yet for me, it was very different. My experience at the time was very hot and cold. I just didn't know where I stood half the time. He was very spontaneous. We'd go off for weekends away, and we'd, with the intention of going for a day, and then would be away for the weekend without any supplies. So we'd have to buy things. He was very kind of spontaneous like that, but that was exciting. He was quite open-minded, which he encouraged me. He was very complimentary about me, how I looked, what he thought of me. He was very kind of like, yeah, he said all the right things that made me feel quite highly about myself. But then when I think about it, and I was thinking about it earlier, he was a white guy, and he would at times use my color as a almost like that, kind of using my color like, oh, your skin's like chocolate. So he'd use my race in a way that was not necessarily, oh, like you're the first Black girl that I've ever kissed, you're this, you're that. And I kind of let that go, really. I didn't really sit comfortably with me, but I thought, okay, if that's how he wants to express himself, fine. And I remember vividly one day, so obviously he'd compliment me in some cases like that. And then in other occasions, I remember one time when I had some music on, and the music was the kind of mainstream chart music by a Black band. The song was No Digging It, if you know the song. And I remember him coming into the lounge where I was cleaning, and he went mental at me, saying, "Get this Black music off now." And I was like, I didn't really know. It was just a compilation CD that I put on whilst I was cleaning. It wasn't like a bashment kind of like music. It was to me, it was mainstream. I didn't understand why he reacted so badly at that. And I was just like, oh, okay. Turned it off, never to be played again. So bear in mind, this is like within weeks of me knowing the guy. So there was some kind of behaviors that were kind of like raising the head a little bit. So that was one occasion. And then the violence started subtly. Well, I say subtly, but it wasn't subtle. So I remember on one occasion sitting next to him on a sofa, and we'd had another heated exchange that resulted in him smashing a mug over my legs, over my knees, smashed it. And I can't remember what the disagreement was about, but he smashed it over my legs. And I don't know whether it was that time when he actually knocked me unconscious. Can't remember, but we're talking weeks, right? So yeah, so then he smashed the cup over my legs. There was one occasion, so it was his birthday. His birthday was mid-January. So this gives you a time frame wise. Okay, so it's his birthday, mid-January. He told me to get dressed up. He bought me this beautiful cream dress. It was absolutely stunning. Amazing, lovely dress. And he said, get dressed up. We're going to go out for my birthday. I think maybe, I think I booked somewhere for us to go to something to eat. I think I booked us to go for a meal. Bearing in mind, it's his birthday. So I knew the venue, yet he insisted that I wear this dress. Now, this dress was very strappy. It was very slinky. It wasn't really appropriate dress attire for your local carvery type place, like a family restaurant. It wasn't really suitable for that, but he insisted that I wear it. I felt uncomfortable wearing it because I knew it wasn't the right dress to wear. And I think I had a jacket and I wanted to keep my jacket on, but he insisted that I take the jacket off and sit there in front of family diners with this slinky dress on, which you'd probably wear to a nightclub. So I was kind of squirming, feeling uncomfortable wearing this dress, and he was having a lovely time. And then we got back to the house, and then through that evening, whatever time, like it was just, we'd been out for a meal, we got back, and within however long of being back in the house, he then launched a barrage of abuse at me because he'd heard from somebody some story about me. Now, the story that he proceeded to tell me was completely fake. There's no way I had done what I was being accused of. Absolutely no way. But he was saying he'd been told this by this person and he trusted this person. And I was like, but you don't trust me, and I'm telling you that it's not true. And he's like, well, of course you're going to say that. But I trust this guy. He's my friend. He's not going to tell me any lies. This is what's happened. And then he proceeded to beat me senseless. He ended up cutting the dress, ripping the dress, cutting it, or because I'm still wearing the dress. And he ended up ripping it off me, cutting it, and beat me up. So that was the first time he actually launched at me. Obviously, we had the incident with the mug. And this isn't about me downplaying any of it. It's just giving you, this is the experience that I had in a short amount of time. And then he proceeded to beat me up, like I say, destroy the dress, rip the dress off me. And as I'm there crying, I'm not really understood what's happened, because as I'm saying, the information that he shared with me was completely fake. There's no way that it was real. And I couldn't understand why this person wanted to stir things up, given the temperament that this guy had. Why on earth would somebody say this to him, other than to cause trouble? This is what was going on, and this is what I was kind of enumerating in my head. So then, like I say, so then he ended up beating me up, destroying the dress, calling me all the names under the sun, and then for some reason then he ended up being quite nurturing afterwards, which is really quite bizarre. Which then again was making me question, thinking, had I done something wrong? Because then he was very loving afterwards. And yes, so it kind of went from there. So that was another major red flag that I was just kind of like, what's going on here? And then the final incident where it was, I know there was another incident, but I won't share that because there's going to be some parts of this that I'm not going to share because they're a little too personal. And then the other major incident where I realized then that I had to get out of there was when, so he was ex-forces and he was very particular about his clothes, and he would iron everything. You know, he'd been in the service for however many years. So he would iron all of his clothes. You know, that was his thing. So you kind of leave him to it because he is ex-military. And whilst he was ironing one evening, we got into another disagreement about something. I don't know what. And as that argument escalated and I could see that this was going to end badly, he actually then harmed me with the iron. Now, I still carry the scars. So we are, what's this, 20, that was 21, 27 years ago. So I still have the physical scars from that incident. Make of that what you will. And at that point then, I was like, this is bad. This is bad. And I was nursing these injuries and he wouldn't let me seek out medical support. They started to become infected. And I did manage to go to the doctors and make the excuse about how I did it to myself. I mean, where the injuries are, there's no way that you would do them to yourself without actually physically holding an iron onto yourself. But I made these excuses about how the injuries had come about, managed to get some antibiotics. I actually then confided in a family member saying, I need to get out of this relationship. This is what he's done to me. And obviously I did this secretly because he would always come to my place of work. He'd be sat at the end of the bar whilst I was working, knowing who I was talking to. And I managed to say this to a family member saying, I need to get out. I can't be here any longer. I need to plan how to leave here without him knowing, because he is not going to be happy with me going. So as a result of that relationship and that break and that kind of like enormous red flag when he harmed me with a hot implement, I then sought refuge. So then I ended up leaving my hometown. Ironically, I ended up living in temporary accommodation, but as a result of experienced domestic violence, abuse, coercive control, manipulation, narcissism in the space of 4 weeks. I lived with him for 4 weeks. So imagine if I'd been with him for any longer. So when somebody speaks to you about, or you hear stories of why are they staying with them? If anyone did that to me, I'd leave. And it's really quite upsetting when people try to minimize or try to, I can't even give you a word. It's like people think it's okay to say, oh, well, if that ever happened to me, I'd just leave. Leaving isn't as simple as just, okay, I'm going to go. You have to, if you're in an abusive relationship, you have to plan your escape. Statistics say that for women who leave violent relationships, the time between them deciding to leave and leave is one of the most dangerous times, because they're in a relationship where they are being controlled in one way or the other. So whether that's them turning up to your place of work so you know exactly where you are, where they're then monitoring your interactions with people, where they have you mistrusting people and making you think that you can't trust people because people are telling stories on you. Where you start doubting yourself. So if you're in a situation where you've had that kind of confidence knocked out of you gradually, where then have you got the strength, the resolve, the resilience to then leave them, given the fact with how inconsistent they can be? So alongside the very violent nastiness, they've also got this sincere, sweet, loving, nurturing side of them that kind of like balances it, makes you think, well, what's going on? So maybe they are okay because they could be nice sometimes, but then they've got this side to them which absolutely got no rational part of them if they can inflict that much harm on somebody. So when women are in that situation where they're kind of torn in, like, I need to go, I've been harmed, but how do I get out without causing more harm to myself? So I fled that relationship in secret. I remember bundling up my little Fiesta at the time with all my worldly belongings. I'd got a space in a women's refuge. And I remember like setting off on one Sunday morning. I don't know where he'd gone, actually. He'd gone somewhere. And I remember, this is my chance. I've got to go. And the refuge says, you can only know the address when you are on your way. We will not give you the address before, because there's other women in the same situation who have fled. And the address is highly confidential. So we will not give you the address until you have actually left. So I knew that I was going to leave. And I remember getting in the car. This is before mobile phones. I remember getting into the car. So I had this telephone number, and I got so far along the dual carriageway. And I rang them and said, right, I'm on the road. And they said, but where are you? And I gave them my location. This says, you need to get into the town where we are and then call us because you're still too close. And basically saying that you could turn around and go back, or you could be being followed. Make sure you're not being followed. Make sure no one knows what you're doing. It has to be top secret. And that was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I was absolutely petrified that he was going to find me and do me over, because he made it quite clear that I was ever to leave, he would harm me. So I got on the road, packed up my car, ended up in a women's refuge, and it was just a harrowing time. It was myself and my daughter. We were sharing a room with another woman with her 3 children in these bunk beds. And when I was there, obviously they ask if you want to press charges. I was so scared. I was like, I can't have anything more to do with him at all. I don't want to take it any further. I just want to be gone. There was absolutely no way that I would ever consider getting back with him. So I ended up living there. And I think, really, to be fair, I was there for a few weeks before I was offered a house near where the refuge was. So I ended up being rehoused in a different town. And it was all very top secret. I never let people know where I was. And it was just a case of protecting myself because I was that fearful. And then I don't know what happened to him after that. But it was just horrendous. And I think obviously there were signs there was red flags there. I'd seen them. I was a bit naive. I was a bit kind of blindsided by all his compliments to start with and his interest in me. And I was just a kid. I didn't have much life experience, and I just liked the attention, to be fair. And I just thought, I'm a good girl. I didn't have a dodgy past. And if I did, it wouldn't have mattered. But it was kind of like when he was casting these aspersions at me, I was just like, it's just not me. I haven't done it. And now, because I was thinking about this before I started filming, I think now, looking back in hindsight, that person who I said had told him stories about me, I think that person never did. I think he used that as a way of justifying his poor behavior to me, and the fact that his pride had been dented because somebody else had said this. The person that he was referring to didn't know me personally, so anything that he would have said would have been a lie. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing that he could have said that he actually knew me, other than like story, gossip, or some making some, what people don't know, they tend to make up. So I don't know whether that person actually did say it, and I never had it out with that person after that, because obviously I left my hometown, and it just made me doubt and question people and think, well, why would you say that to somebody like that? And that's what I thought. That was my biggest kind of hurt in it. It was like, why would you say something that could potentially stoke a beast, that they would then be that infuriated by that embarrassment of what it was? And I know what it was. Just thought about it. A person had told this guy who I was seeing that I had flirted with some guys that had come into the pub, that I was all over them, that I was a girl about town, that I was just interested in playing off these guys all against each other. That's what it was. It just came to me. Now, I know the guys that this guy was talking about, they'd come into the pub and they were all there having a little meeting, and I was just having a laugh with one of the guys. There was no flirting. It was just me having a conversation, and like, they were making some jokes or whatever. There was nothing else in it. And that's as far as it went. And that guy was there, and he told the guy that I was seeing what had happened. And that made him question my loyalty. But the other guy wasn't on the scene at the time. That's what it was. Yes. So anyway, but I just don't know whether or not there was if that conversation had actually happened in the way that he was trying to allude. I don't think so now, thinking about it. I think he was just using that as an excuse to validate him beating me senseless and destroying my gorgeous cream dress that I was wearing. Anyway, so that was the first abusive relationship that I was involved in. 4 weeks of living with someone ended up with me fleeing my hometown, moving into a women's refuge, and being relocated to a different town for fear of him continuing his abuse. So that was my first domestic violence relationship. And then, how many years later? So 20 years ago, I then was introduced to somebody else in circumstances that are unusual. And I ended up in befriending this person. And the relationship, like I say, was unconventional, but it involved me making a lot of sacrifices, shall we say. And in a way, now when I look back, because obviously we all have the beauty of growth and hindsight, and now when I look back at that relationship, I'm speechless that I put myself through it. But anyway, okay. Unconventional relationship. Okay. Which resulted in me making huge sacrifices for this person, right? I put my life on hold for them, literally put my life on hold for them, making this huge gesture of commitment on the pretense that they would change their ways, that they would make a fresh start, that they would settle down. So I kind of like went into this with all these promises. And there was a period of time where for 3 years, I continued to make sacrifices and they continued to make promises. And our relationship was very much, I wanted to give him security. I wanted to give him a home. I wanted to be a stabling influence for him, all while they made promises to me. So there's lots of me giving and me just waiting for them to kind of honor their part of the agreement. So let's say the relationship, as it then developed and became quite a little bit chaotic, it was a little bit exciting, don't get me wrong, it's a very different life to what I've been leading before. I'm very much a person who goes into relationships and is the fixer, who then takes on characteristics of their partners and their partners' lives. I was so uncertain, or I didn't have a clear personality of who I was. I just kind of went into these relationships and became half of them rather than my own person. Like I say, I can look back in hindsight now. At the time, it was very much, I wanted to be that stable influence for them. I felt they needed this stable influence. They're telling me they need that stable influence and that they want to make all these changes. So I'm doing that. So in that relationship, it was a bit hot and cold. At times, it was quite volatile. In some respects, we were both as bad as each other in that kind of like the arguing, the fieriness, quite fiery, quite passionate. That kind of like dynamics where it's hot, it's cold, and then you'd fall out and then you'd make up. It was all that kind of like all of that, which now I know isn't a good way to conduct a relationship. But at the time, I'm thinking, oh, it's all fiery, it's all exciting. Can't say naively, because at that point I was a little bit more worldly wise. I wasn't naive. I knew what I was doing, but I still carried on because I wanted to be a partner to this person. So like I say, the relationship was very volatile. Times we were as bad as each other. At one point, he even likened our relationship to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So that's the film with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, where they have massive fights. So he likened our relationship to that. I thought that was a compliment, bizarrely. Anyhow, so the relationship escalated where it would be quite violent, quite volatile. And then the first time he hit me, as in, well, no, the second time he'd hit me, actually. We were on holiday in Barcelona. Now, we were out drinking. It was kind of a holiday celebration. I think I'd even paid for it to take him away as a little treat, as a little getaway. He'd always wanted to travel, and it was a case of me like, oh yeah, that'd be nice. I even bought him an Xbox and a fridge to put in my lounge for his beer. So compliant I was. Anything to make him happy, anything to make him stay, anything to show him that I was a good partner. I bent over backwards to appease him, which is another little warning sign, because it was me that was making all the sacrifices. It was me trying to make his life more comfortable, and he just carried on doing what he was doing anyway. So yeah, so the second time he hit me was that we were actually on holiday in Barcelona. We'd had a lovely few days. It was all quite romantic. He actually proposed to me whilst we were in Barcelona. And it might have been on the night of the engagement. We'd gone out drinking, which ended in a huge, he just launched at me. He didn't like my response to something. Again, there's some parts of this that I will edit out because it's just, private. But the argument erupted on the way back to the hotel, which resulted in him proceeding to lay numerous punches to my head whilst holding me by the hair and literally picking me up like a rag doll. punching me, dropping me on the floor, picking me up, punching me, dropping me on the floor. Several times this happened, laying punches to my face, head, body. Just kept on doing that. And I don't know how long this went on for, but what had happened then is that the Spanish police seen what had happened, and they're a bit scary, aren't they? Because they come turn up with guns and cars and everything else. So they'd seen what had happened and they were going to arrest him. And then it was like, oh dear, this can't happen. You know, I felt really responsible for him and felt like I can't get him arrested. And then I said to I don't even know what they did with him, but they put me in a car and took me back to the hotel. They were going to arrest him, but I knew that would be quite serious and significant if it did, if he did end up arrested in Spain with Spanish police. So I ended up being taken back to the hotel. I remember ringing my family saying what he'd done. I don't know what to do. The police have taken him. I don't know where they've taken him. And then however many hours he did turn back up at the hotel room. And the next day, it was like nothing had happened. I think we were due to travel back the next day. So all my face is all swollen, my jaw, everything is aching. I've got a fat lip. And then he wanted to go on a trip to the zoo. And there's pictures of me now, and I've seen them. My face is all swollen and I'm barely smiling. I don't think I can smile. I'm in that much pain. And I was like, this is just so wrong. And I felt guilty because he could have ended up getting arrested, deported. I don't even know what happens in Spain. And I just felt guilty. I just felt bad. I was just like, this is not good. Like, we'd had such a lovely time and it just turned so sour. And I was there having to wear this engagement ring. And I'd just been beaten up the night before for refusing to do something that he wanted me to do. And I was quite valid at that point in that refusal, but he just thought I was just being unfair to him. It's something that he wanted to do and I refused. So that's when I got beat up that time. But I stayed with him. I then ended up getting pregnant with my twins. And the relationship just went from bad to worse, basically. So he wasn't as brutal in the violence as it was with the first guy that I mentioned. It was more subtle than that. Obviously, we had that big blow up in Barcelona. That kind of thing didn't happen again. However, he was very good at the manipulation. He was very good at almost like the coercion, because it was like he would kind of plant seeds and make me doubt friendships and question my friends' loyalty. And so it ended up that I would be quite isolated from my family and friends because of the seeds and the doubt and the way that he'd kind of played people off against each other. It made it easier if I didn't see certain friends, if I didn't see family members, it'd make it easier. And that's what I did. So between the September from when we went to Barcelona, from then until December time, I actually got caught pregnant. And then we planned to have a family holiday to Sharm el-Sheikh over Christmas. Prior to going at Christmas for this holiday, in my mind, I already wanted to end the relationship. And I also wanted to end the pregnancy. So I had already made connections with a local clinic. And in my mind, this holiday to me was make or break. I hadn't said that to him, but I'd already kind of made the decision that the relationship would be ended. But I had to go away because I was taking my child, his child, and it was a family holiday. It had been paid for. And that it was make or break. So I'd already gone for my first appointment at the clinic with regards to having a determination. And they made another appointment for me for the 3rd of January. So it was kind of like, we'll go make or break In my mind, we went on this holiday. The holiday was absolutely horrendous. I was so ill on holiday. Obviously, at the time, I was very early on in the pregnancy. I was very, very ill. I spent days in bed. It was just horrendous. So what happened in that holiday, like I say, it just further confirmed that the relationship was not going anywhere, that this is a relationship that I didn't want to be in. And I certainly didn't want to have children with him and be in a relationship with him. So that further confirmed that for me. And so much so is that I ended up cutting that holiday short, paying for myself and my daughter to get an early flight from there, 2 days early, I think it was, to get out. So on the occasion when I decided that I was leaving and that I booked my flight back to the UK for myself and my daughter, leaving him and his daughter there, was on Christmas Eve. So I actually got myself and my daughter onto the flight. I actually had to go and find and tell the hotel staff that I needed another hotel room, that I was leaving, but for them not to say anything or not say where I was going, because of how violent he was. And bearing in mind that this was Egypt, they didn't take too kindly the fact that I was leaving, and they wanted me to pay the room bill that he had ran up at the bar, which I refused to do because he didn't allow me access to the safe to get any money out. And I just had my credit card with me, and there was no way I was paying his bill from the bar at an all-inclusive hotel. I mean, how can you run up a bar bill? Make of that what you will. So I ended up leaving Christmas Eve with my daughter, and coming back to the UK, telling him the relationship was over. I wanted nothing more to do with him. So that was Christmas Eve when I came back. And then I went for my appointment on the 3rd of January. I went out for my appointment. They said to me, oh, in order to proceed with this, you have to have a scan so we can check your dates. I knew my dates was right. There was no issue with my dates, but this is the process that I went through. So as they're doing the scan, they then share the news that I am pregnant with twins. Life changed very much at that point. So then I've got the news that I'm carrying twins. That then changes my thoughts and thinking, what on earth am I going to do? And then through conversations with family members, they're saying, you're going to have to tell him. You're going to have to say. You can't not just have them and not tell them. So bearing in mind, I'd already decided to end the relationship. Then I had to reluctantly tell him that I was not only was I pregnant still, that I was carrying twins. Yes. Going back into a relationship, giving it another go with someone that clearly had no respect for me, that continually treated me badly, that had no intention of carrying out any of the promises that he'd made early on in the relationship. I reluctantly went back with him to give it another go. Now that lasted, I want to say, from the Tuesday. Oh, he was lovely. He was good as gold. He was like, oh, I just want this. I'm going to make it all so better. I'm sorry. All these apologies came. So that was on the Tuesday. Then by the Friday, so bearing in mind, I was working full time whilst he was at home doing whatever he wanted. I'm just telling you this like from the Tuesday. And then during that week, he just gradually got worse and worse. So he'd just sit in the house drinking. And then on the Friday, I vividly remember this is when I decided that I had to end the relationship yet again. And then on the Friday, resulted in a day of him doing what he wanted, drinking and whatever. And then he wanted me to go and collect him from somewhere. And he was in real bad state, as in had been drinking all day. He'd had lots of fun with his friends, and there I am coming to burst his bubble and dragging him home, like he'd promised that he wouldn't do and that he would be there for me. So I'm saying, you made me all these promises. The only reason why I'm giving you another chance is because you said that you wanted to make changes, that you said you were going to be different. And this is saying different to me because you were doing what you want again. And then it's me trying to control him. It's me that's trying to burst his bubble. It's me that's being a killjoy. It's me, it's me, it's me. But he reluctantly came back to my house and then proceeded to have a huge argument that became violent. And at this time as well, this was the first time that my daughter, who was then 11, yes, she was 11. It was just before her, no, she was 10, just before her 11th birthday. And she was actually in the house when he was kicking off. Now, that's the first time she's ever witnessed anything like that. She didn't see it. She definitely heard the violence and everything that he was imparting on me. And as much as I reminded him that she was in the house, he didn't care. He had no control. He was just vile. And I was fearful because at that point I was 16 weeks pregnant. He knew I was 16 weeks pregnant. Obviously, I knew it's a high-risk pregnancy when you carry twins. I'd already been told that, no stress, no this, no that. And he has just launched this barrage of abuse with me. He slung me across the bed. I'd fallen off the bed. I tried to ring the police. I was screaming for help, thinking maybe the neighbors would call the police. No one did call the police. I tried to call the police myself on my landline. He proceeded to smash that up. I tried to call on my mobile. He took that off me, and then left me crying. And at one point he had me on the floor with his hands around my throat. Now, this wasn't the first time that he'd gripped me around the throat. And I know that when he'd done it before, in the past, I'd passed out before. And I knew that's what he was trying to do, as he pinned me down on the kitchen floor, that he was trying to grip me so then I would pass, so that I would pass out. So he had his hands around my throat, holding me down. I did manage to get from underneath him because obviously he was drunk and intoxicated. So as much as he was stronger than me, he was unstable. So I managed to pick him off me and get out of that situation. And I ended up staying in the house. This was the Friday. So this was the Friday. And then I had to get up early the next day to go meet somebody. And I just kind of kept it to myself. Knew very well that my daughter had heard it all, but hadn't said anything to her. And then over that weekend, I managed then to pack his remaining belongings and get them out of my house, because he didn't have a key at that point, thankfully. Get them out of the house, told him, I'm not having you back because you just done that to me, and got him out of the house. And then over the next few days, I proceeded then to contact the police, tell them what had happened, to get it marked on record, what he'd done. I didn't want to press charges at that point because I was fearful of him and his connections locally. So I didn't want to press charges at that point, but I just wanted it on record. Made it quite clear that I was planning on leaving, because at that point I was planning on giving up my house and leaving, because there was no way that I wanted to be in that town with him, raising children, with how he'd been, because I knew how controlling he could be and how volatile he would be if he was around children, because he clearly had no respect for my daughter being in the house when he launched that attack on me. So I was planning on leaving, but I had all these animals that I had to rehome, rehouse, sell. So I sold a dog, I gave a dog away, I sent animals back to pet shops, did all of that. And then I left my house and did a midnight flip. It wasn't actually a midnight flip, it was during the day. But I basically emptied my house in a few hours. It was a rented house that I lived in, and they put metal shutters on to protect the house from squatters. So in less than a day, I'd packed up and gone, disappeared. He had no idea where I'd gone. So basically both the severe domestic abuse relationships that I've been in have resulted in me fleeing my hometown for safety. And that is somebody who is more self-assured than most, who is certain, but I still ended up in relationships where domestic abuse was prevalent, and in short periods of time. So going back to the soap opera with coercive control, it happens subtly. It happens almost methodically, because I think these men, and I say men because I'm obviously referring, as a woman, I'm referring to a relationship where the woman is a victim, don't like that word, and the male is a perpetrator. And I believe that male perpetrators of DV have a history of perpetrating violence to women, and they have a clear history of that, a clear pattern. And they may not, most of the time, if they refer to their previous partners, they will refer to them as being crazy exes that have done this to them. They've treated them so badly, so that's why they're just wounded and they're so hurt, and that's affected the way that they go into new relationships, that they're holding on to all this anger towards their ex, that then spews out to their current partners. Fair enough, you know, we all have residue from our previous relationships, but that means then to go away and do the work, so you don't then spew this venom and put it on your new partner. But like I say, this is all growth, this is all learning that I've come to, this is all my journey and and how I've come to that point in my own kind of relationship with myself, and that forgiveness for myself for being in those situations. But like I say, I believe wholeheartedly, and obviously from my experience, that these men seek out women to impart this barrage, this, you know, where there's like kind of like love bombing at the start of a relationship. They make women feel incredible, that they are like the light that they've been searching for, that you are the one. And then they proceed to break you down, to exclude you, to make you question. I mean, I'd never heard the term gaslighting. I didn't know what it was until recently. I'm like, oh, I can clearly see that is what happened in those relationships. They gaslit me, they manipulated, there was coercive control, but not that they would say that they were controlling, because they're like, oh, you decided you didn't want to see your family. You decided that you didn't want to go out with your friends. But it's painted in a way that makes them think, okay, well, I just want to spend my time with you. I just love being with you. You know, when we're together, I feel like, you know, we're so in sync, and it's all a nonsense. But at the time you think they just want to be with me. Oh, bless them. No, it's not healthy to be with someone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not healthy. And it's, you know, these people are insecure people. So it's just, so I wanted that time to explore. You know, people end up in these relationships and they don't set out for it. You know, obviously when I decided to get pregnant with what I didn't know at the time, with my twins, I didn't want to be raising children on my own. I didn't want to have to leave the relationship. I thought, you could say stupidly, that by having a child with him, it'll be what he needed, because that's what he said. Oh, if we have children, I will do this. If you do this and that. It was all about me making sacrifices, and there was no change behavior on his part. And I suppose I've not really had a chance to put that side across to it, put it out there, because in anything that I've produced, any literature, well, not literature, any post that I posted, I allude to the fact that I've been homeless twice. I allude to being in violent relationships, but don't really give any context around it. So me doing this is putting context around that in my near on 50 years, I've had 2 violent relationships. Fair enough, one was far more violent than the other, but the other one there was violence in there. As much as it was volatile on both sides, there were some instances that were purely aimed at me for being me. So yes, I wanted that opportunity to kind of put that out there, because ultimately people will keep on saying, why doesn't she just leave? And like I say, when you're planning to leave, it is veiled in secrecy. You are trying to keep yourself and your children safe in that, Because if your partner at that time knows that you are planning to leave, that is one of the most dangerous times for women in abusive relationships. And is it 1 in 4 women are killed by their current or ex-partner? I will get the actual statistics and I'll put them in this post. I'll put them in the show notes, because there are a high proportion of women who are killed by their current or ex-partner. So when you put it into framework like that, most people do not have experience of violence, coercion, manipulation in their relationships. And I think they're very blessed if that doesn't occur. In 2 of my significant relationships, it has. And that is from someone who is confident, who is self-assured, who has had a good career, who is a good parent, but I have made some choices that have resulted in relationships that have not been healthy. And that's something that I have worked through, something that I'm still looking at with compassion and exploration, because I'm starting to understand why I ended up in relationships like them. And that's a lot of kind of like unpicking of stories, unpicking of understanding, and that kind of acceptance of, okay, I've ended up in these relationships, but now I am more clear on my boundaries. I'm more certain on what I like. And to be fair, when I were to explore another relationship, I'm very clear on what I will and won't put up with. And that is something that isn't going to change. I'm just going to get more steadfast, more kind of putting my stake in the ground. This is my line. If you cross it, then that's it. Because I have not upheld my boundaries before. Now I'm very clear on what my boundaries are. And like I say, I have that compassion for my past self and that growth and that life experience, because all being all, if I hadn't have gone through those experiences, I wouldn't be sat here today.